My hands were shaking when my sister told me that her fiancé wanted to invite his best friend to be one of the bridesmaids. So far, so good. I smiled, nodded, even pretended to be curious. But when she said the name, I felt like someone had stabbed an icy knife right between my ribs. Ivan, the father of my child, the man who got me pregnant and then vanished without a word. What were the odds? There was no way they could know. My sister never knew what happened between us. I never told her that I spent months dreaming of a life with him, that I had planned a future with him, that when I told him I was pregnant, he simply disappeared, that I went to his apartment and found it empty, with the blinds down and the locks changed, that his number no longer existed, that his mother pretended to know nothing, that I called once, twice, 30 times, until I finally accepted he wasn't coming back, that I spent entire nights crying with my hand on my belly, wondering if I had done something wrong, that I gave birth alone, that I carried motherhood without help, without comfort, without answers. And now, years later, life brought him back, not to apologize, not to meet his daughter, not to face what he did. No, he came back as an honored guest, as some kind of emotional celebrity. As if he were the ideal best friend, he came back without knowing I was here, without imagining I was the bride's sister, without suspecting that every step he took toward the altar would be watched by the woman he had hurt the most. I didn't say anything. I didn't break down. I didn't raise my voice. I just said yes. I accepted he would come. I accepted he would wear a suit and smile like his conscience was clean. I accepted it all. But inside me, an idea began to grow. It wasn't revenge. Not in the way people imagine. It wasn't pure hatred. It was something more precise, more surgical, like a need to place the truth on the table, to make sure silence wouldn't get the last word, to ensure that, just once, he felt even a fraction of the weight I had carried alone. The first time I saw him again was at the wedding rehearsal. He showed up with that charming air that had once dazzled me, his beard a bit fuller, his hair shorter, a perfectly calculated smile. He greeted everyone, hugged my sister like they were lifelong friends, even brought her a flower. Then he saw me, and for a second, his eyes locked onto mine. I didn't react. I just looked at him with the same calm you'd have watching a storm through thick glass. He blinked, smiled, and walked over. He extended his hand like we were distant acquaintances, said my name softly, like testing if he still remembered it correctly. He said it with respect, like I was a figure from the past who deserved reverence. I gave him my hand, held it a second longer than necessary. I felt the tremble in his palm. I noticed it. I logged it, and I knew that he remembered me, that he had recognized me the moment he walked in, that he had never expected to see me again, especially not like this, dressed in dignity, surrounded by family, with no trace of the vulnerable woman who once cried in a bathroom, clutching a positive pregnancy test. He spoke to me as if nothing had ever happened, said it was good to see me, that life was strange, wasn't it, that he hadn't expected this. Coincidence? I nodded, saying as little as possible. Every word he spoke was a push against my memory. But I stayed firm. I didn't mention Amelia. I didn't ask why he left. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an explanation. Not yet. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept Amelia's documents. I took out the paternity test. Yes, I had done it on my own when she was born. A swab, a private lab, a hair sample I'd saved from when he lived with me. Written confirmation. Ivan was the father. Not because I said so. Because science did. I placed the document in an envelope, and I knew I wouldn't use it just yet. That envelope was a sealed sentence. and its time would come. The second time I saw him, he was laughing with my father in the garden. I stood by the window, holding a glass of water I no longer intended to drink. I watched the two of them, as if I were watching a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. Ivan, wearing that same smug smile, that same air of being the nicest guy in the room. My father, laughing at one of his jokes. The same father who, years ago, had sat across from me in silence when I told him I was pregnant. The same father who said nothing when Ivan disappeared, who didn't even ask me the name of the man who left. And now they were laughing, as if none of it had happened. I went back to my room and locked the door. Amelia was lying on the bed, watching a cartoon on my phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Her front tooth was missing. She had lost it the week before, proudly putting it under her pillow, and waking up to find a coin, and a note I'd written in disguised handwriting. My little girl, my miracle, the reason I survived those early years. She looked nothing like him, thankfully. She had my eyes, my mouth, my stubbornness, and she had never asked about her father. Not because I'd forbidden it, but because she simply didn't care. Her world was full without him. That night, after Amelia fell asleep, I sat at my desk and opened the envelope again. The paternity test, the printed truth. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered the day I got the results. I had cried, not because I doubted it, but because something about having it in black and white made it more real, more final. I had debated sending it to him, to his mother, to everyone. But in the end, I folded it and put it away. I chose silence. I told myself I didn't need him to acknowledge it, that I was enough, and I was. I had been. But now he was. Back. Now he was walking around with my family, smiling and joking and acting like a beloved guest. And I couldn't stand it. The next day, we had the bridal brunch. A small gathering before the wedding. My sister looked radiant, nervous, happy. She held my hand tightly as we walked into the restaurant. Ivan was already there, sitting at the far end of the table. He stood when he saw us, smiled at me again. That same damn smile. I returned it, briefly. Then I looked away. We sat across from each other. All through the meal, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, trying to read me. He was testing the waters. I could tell, waiting to see if I would say something, if I would react. But I didn't. I played my role. I laughed at the right moments. I helped my sister cut the cake. I posed for photos. And when it was over, I walked straight to him, smiled sweetly, and said, "Can we talk?" He looked stunned for a second, then nodded. We walked to the patio, alone. The air was cool. I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "You haven't changed," he said, trying to sound light. "I have," I replied. "A lot." He nodded, looked at the ground. "I didn't know you were her sister," he said. "No, you didn't. Know a lot of things." He looked up at me, searching my face. "I'm sorry," he said, almost a whisper. I laughed, a single humorless sound. "No, you're not, but you will be." He frowned. "What does that mean?" I stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the weight of my presence. "It means," I said, "that the past isn't as buried as you'd like to believe." His jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know how to handle it. He muttered. I panicked. I was young. You were a coward, I said, cutting him off. You left. You disappeared. You knew I was pregnant. You vanished. I was scared. And I was alone. That shut him up. He didn't deny it. Didn't try to explain anymore. Just stood there, looking small. And I realized in that moment that I didn't need him to suffer. I didn't need him to cry. I just needed him to see me. The real me. The woman he abandoned. The mother of his child. The one who didn't break, even when he did everything to make sure she would. I have something for you, I said. I handed him a second envelope. Not the original. A copy. What is it? He asked. Proof, I said, that your actions had consequences. Then I turned and walked away. He didn't speak to me for the rest of that day. Not during the final wedding preparations. Not during the rehearsal dinner. Not even when we stood side by side, rehearsing where we'd walk and how we'd smile for the photos. He avoided my eyes like they burned, and in a way, they did. I had spent years carrying the weight of his silence. Now it was his turn. Let him carry mine. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty. I didn't. But because I could feel something shifting in the air, like the tension between past and present was about to snap. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd been through. The doctor appointments I attended alone. The nights my daughter cried with a fever, and I held her with one hand while Googling symptoms with the other. The jobs I had to quit when daycare became unaffordable. The birthdays I planned with balloons and homemade cakes, pretending it didn't matter that only one parent was there. I thought about all the times Emilia asked, in her tiny voice, "Why don't I have a dad like the others?" And I would smile and say, "Because you have me, and I'm more than enough." I believed it when I said it. I had to. But deep down, I knew that question was a scar. A silent one. A scar that didn't bleed, but never healed. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and warm. The sun mocked me with its cheerfulness. I put on the dress Laura had chosen for the bridesmaids. Pale lavender, delicate, almost ethereal, and fixed my hair the way she liked. I painted my lips, powdered my face, and looked in the mirror. I looked calm, elegant, untouchable. No one would guess what I was carrying. At the venue, everything was picture perfect. Flowers everywhere, soft music playing. Guests dressed in pastels and whites. My sister glowed. I smiled with her, fixed her veil, calmed her nerves. She had no idea. She would never know, not fully. And that was okay. This wasn't about her. It was about truth. The ceremony began. We walked down the aisle in pairs. I was near the front. Ivan was behind me. I could feel him, even without looking. That same presence that used to make my heart race, now made my skin crawl. I held Emilia's hand tightly as we walked. Yes, she was there too, dressed like a little fairy, scattering petals with a grin. She didn't know who he was. Not yet. But part of me thought maybe she could sense it. Children feel things. Adults try to hide. When the ceremony ended and the guests began to mingle, I slipped away, went to the booth where the AV tech was checking the projector for the reception. I handed him a flash drive and a crisp bill. "This is the right file?" he asked. I nodded. "It's the only one." He gave me a thumbs up. "We're good to go." The dinner began. Toasts were made. Laughs were shared. Ivan gave a speech, short and sentimental, the kind that gets polite applause. He looked around the room when he finished, and his eyes landed on me. Just for a second, I didn't clap. Then the lights dimmed. The screen lit up. Everyone expected a slideshow. Photos of the couple, maybe childhood pictures. Something sweet. What they got was something else entirely. The video began with silence. Just white letters on a black screen. Some people run from love. Others run from responsibility. Then a photo appeared. A blurry scan of a pregnancy test. Then another image. A hospital room. A baby wrapped in a blanket. Then another. A paternity test result, with Ivan's name highlighted. Gasps filled the room. Some people turned to look at him. Others looked at me. He stood frozen, mouth slightly open, hands clenched at his sides. The final image. A close-up of Amelia, smiling wide, missing her front tooth, and below it, the caption. She never asked for a father, but he had a choice. Silence. Crushing silence. Then the screen went black. I stood up, walked to the center of the room, took the mic from the startled DJ. "I'm sorry for the interruption," I said calmly. "But I thought it was time for the truth to have a seat at this wedding." I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. He was already unraveling. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I didn't stay to watch him leave. I handed the microphone back to the DJ, kissed my sister on the cheek before she could speak, and walked out of the reception hall into the warm night air. My hands were steady. My heartbeat calm. I had expected a storm, shouting, gasps, maybe even someone chasing after me. But instead, the night was quiet. And I liked it that way. I didn't cry. Not on the drive home. Not while changing into my pajamas. Not when I tucked Amelia into bed and kissed her forehead. She asked me if the wedding had gone well. I said yes. She smiled and turned over, hugging her stuffed bunny. I sat at the edge of her bed for a long time, just watching her breathe. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't from guilt. It was from the release. Like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. The truth was out. The weight was gone. And if he hated me for it, if my sister was upset, if guests whispered about me for months to come, I didn't care. I had done what I needed to do. Not for revenge, for closure, for dignity. The next morning, there were messages, dozens of them. Some from family members who didn't know what to say. Others from old friends who had been at the wedding and wanted to check on me. And one from Laura. It was short. "We need to talk. Alone, please." I waited until Amelia was at school before I went to her apartment. She opened the door slowly, her eyes red and tired. I expected shouting, anger, maybe a slap, but she just stepped aside and let me in. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her and said the truth. "Because I didn't want to make my pain your problem. Because I didn't want to turn your wedding into a funeral. And because I thought I could keep it all buried until he showed up again." She nodded, slowly. "He didn't tell me anything, not even after the video." "I know," I said. "He never does," she sniffled. "You should have told me before. I would have chosen you." I smiled. "I know that too, but it wasn't about choosing sides. It was about letting him know that some things don't stay buried." Then she reached for my hand and held it tight. He left, right after the video, didn't say a word, just vanished again. Of course he did. "Are you okay?" she asked. I thought about it for a second. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a long while, I really am." We didn't talk about it again. Some wounds are better left acknowledged, but not reopened. She never blamed me. She said the guests were shocked, but that the night moved on somehow. People danced, laughed, toasted, as if the truth was just one more thing to digest with the dessert. I didn't hear from Ivan for 3 weeks. Then, one morning, I opened my email and saw his name in my inbox. The subject line just said, "I owe you more than an apology." I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. The message was long, rambling, emotional. He wrote about the fear he felt back then, how unprepared he was, how he hated himself for leaving but didn't know how to fix it. He said he saw Amelia's photo in the video and couldn't stop crying for hours afterward, that he finally understood what he had lost, that he didn't expect forgiveness but wanted to try, wanted to know her, wanted to meet the little girl he abandoned. I didn't reply. Not right away. I reread the message every night that week. I thought about Amelia, about how she might feel seeing him, about whether she even needed that door open. And then I asked her, "Sweetie," I said, kneeling beside her one night, "do you remember when you asked why you didn't have a dad?" She nodded. "Well," I said carefully, "he reached out. He says he wants to meet you. Only if you want to." She looked at me with those big, serious eyes, thought about it for a moment. Then she asked, "Is he nice?" I paused. Then I said, "He might try to be, but I'll be there with you, always." She nodded slowly. "Okay, maybe one day, not now." And that was enough for me. It's been almost a year since the wedding. The air has changed. I have changed. The heaviness I carried for so long has loosened its grip on my shoulders. Some mornings, I forget to think about him. That's how I know I'm healing. Ivan never wrote again after that email. He didn't push. He didn't ask. There was a time when I would have mistaken that for respect. Now I see it for what it is. Convenience. Disappearing is easier than repairing. Silence is safer than accountability. And some men mistake absence for nobility. He never reached out on Amelia's birthday. Never asked if she was healthy. Never sent a card, a photo frame, a single word. His disappearance was never about fear. It was about selfishness. Sometimes, late at night when Amelia is asleep, I open the folder where I keep the evidence. The paternity test, yes, but also the printouts of our old texts. The sonogram I took a photo of and emailed to myself just in case. The short letter I wrote but never sent. The one that said, "You missed the moment she opened her eyes." I don't cry over it anymore. I read it like you read someone else's story, with empathy, but also with distance. Life has reshaped itself, slowly, not in grand sweeping changes, but in small tender ways. I started waking up before my alarm. I paint sometimes, badly, but with joy. I take Amelia to the park on Sundays and let her choose the music in the car. Even when she picks the same song 5 times in a row, we laugh more than we used to. She's growing fast, wiser than her years. Sometimes, when she stares at me too long, I feel like she sees the version of me I'm still becoming. Laura and I are closer now. There was a moment after the wedding where I worried things would fracture, that she'd see me as the storm that shook her perfect day. But instead, she saw the truth. She held space for it, and she held space for me. That's more than I could have asked for. Her husband never mentioned Ivan again. I think he was just as blindsided as the rest of us. Maybe more, but some silences are necessary. They act as fences, not to punish, but to protect. Matteo came into our lives gently. He didn't try to fill empty spaces. He respected the echoes. The first time he met Amelia, he knelt to her eye level and asked her what she liked to draw. She said dragons, but only the nice kind. He said those were his favorite too. They spent 20 minutes coloring together. No small talk, no force, just quiet understanding. That was the moment I knew. We go slow, not because we have to, but because we want to. Some loves aren't meant to sweep you off your feet. Some loves are meant to anchor you, to hold you steady while you grow. He knows about Ivan. He knows there are rooms in my heart that will always be locked. And he doesn't ask for the key. He just waits at the door. Sometimes Amelia asks me questions that stop time, like, "Do you think flowers get lonely when no one picks them?" Or, "If people go away but you still love them, do they know?" I always tell her the truth, or my version of it. I say, flowers like to grow wild, or sometimes people feel love, even when they don't deserve it. And sometimes I ask myself those same questions. Not about Yvonne, about me, about the woman I used to be, the one who waited for someone who was never coming back, the one who thought love was pain with prettier packaging. I think she would be proud of who we became. I hope so. The world didn't fall apart the night I showed the truth on that wedding screen, but something cracked, something false, and from that crack, something real was born. Honesty, release, a space to finally breathe. The past isn't a chain anymore. It's a map. A story I lived, yes, but not the one I'm still writing. And in the new chapters, we are not waiting for anyone to come back. We are already home.